Hey guys, welcome back to our channel. So in this video, I'll be showing you how to work on HTML forms with the input elements. Okay, so what does that mean actually? So that means we will be creating a form, okay, in our web page, which will have the input elements like text field, checkboxes, radio buttons, and drop down. Okay, so we'll see how to create the text fields, how to create the checkboxes in your form, like if there are multiple options to choose, how to create the checkboxes for that, how to create a radio button. If you don't want a checkbox, you can use a radio button, and how to create a drop down. So basically three types of input element: checkboxes, radio button, and drop down, as well as the text field for an HTML form. Okay, so let's get started. First of all, we'll start with the doc type. Okay, so how will that form actually look like? Okay, so it will look something like this. Let's say our assumption is this is our web page. Okay, and there will be some heading. Okay, let's say HTML forms and HTML inputs. I'll just write as HF and the input elements, right? So that's my heading for that. Okay, so underneath that, what I'm going to show you, first of all, a text field will come up, okay, wherein you can input your text. Okay, here you can input how to create this one. Next step would be we have to create some options. Suppose let's say our option is our option 1, option 2, and we have to create checkboxes beside it. Okay, so that you can select the checkbox and put a tick mark on that for a particular option which you want. Suppose this one. Okay, and next you have to create the radio button. Suppose same option, option 1 and option 2, and just beside that radio button will be in the form of a circle, right? So you have to just select which circle you want to choose. Okay, and at the last there will be a drop down wherein you can there will be an arrow over here wherein you can select the options. Like clicking on this particular arrow, you can select the option. So this is how the whole web page will appear like. Okay, so now, since we have done the doc type, we have to move on to the HTML and the head tag. So we'll just write HTML and then the head. Okay. Now, I'll be creating this particular form without the CSS first of all, and then once the form is done, we'll try to put the CSS as well, and then check what is the difference in the form with CSS and without CSS. Okay, so I'll just mention the CSS stuffs over here. I'll not mention the file name for the CSS. Okay, from where the HTML can read the CSS file. So I'll just use the meta character set so that it can understand the language, what we are actually using it over here. Okay, and then the meta name so that we are able to view the form correctly. Okay, like I want it in the center, and rest of the radio buttons and everything should be in the left hand side. So for that, just write viewport. Okay, and the content so whatever my content will be, it will adjust according to the width of the device, whether you are checking it in your laptops or in your mobile phones or desktop or Mac. Okay, and herein I'll be also mentioning the scale, like the initial scale, which I'll put it as 1.0. Okay, and just close this off. And next, as I said, like we should have a title for this particular web page. So let's say the title is HTML forms and input elements. Okay, this would be the title. So let's close off the title. Once this is done, now as I said, like I'll be first of all showing you without the CSS. So I'll just write the CSS code over here, and I'll not link the page in which the CSS we will create. Okay, later on we'll do that. So I'll just write link rel wherein our styling will be done for CSS. So inside the rel you can write the style sheet. Okay, and the type of this would be text. So text / CSS. Okay, and herein we have to put on, suppose I'll just write right for now, style.css is the name of the file. Okay, that's a random, that's normal. There's nothing inside style.css. Okay, now let's move on to the main, the body part. Okay, now what we have to create. So for that, first of all, let's close the header and then create the body part. So inside that, we have to first of all start with the container wherein, all which I showed you, wherein all your input elements like the text field, checkboxes, radio buttons, and drop down will be there, right? So to start with the container, we have to write the div class. So div class and then container. Okay, and suppose first we have to start with the HTML forms. So I'll just write it like a heading so that it's just for viewing purpose, like whoever the viewer is viewing, he or she can understand like, yes, we are working with the HTML forms and input elements. Okay, so this header is closed, and inside this I'll just use a paragraph so that it says, like, let's say I type explore various input elements HTML. Okay, and then close off the p tag. Now next, what you have to do, so next you have to go on with the form, like right wherein you will have, like, this would be the form, the whole web page, and here in the left hand side we need the form wherein you will first of all have the text field, right, wherein you can enter the text. So for that you have to first of all go for the first form action. So we'll just take the tag as form, and then inside the action and the method will be in a form of a post. Okay, next we have to write the div wherein you will have the form group. Okay, and underneath that you have to mention, like, we need to have a space, something like this. Okay, wherein you have to enter your input should be right here. Okay, right inside this. So for this, what we have to do, we have to create a label. Okay, so we'll create a label, and then inside the label we'll write what we are taking the label for. We will write for text field. Okay, we are taking it for text field, so I'll just write text field. Okay, and inside this I'll just write text, so that it will be displayed when we see the output, text field will be displayed over there. Okay, fine. So that's our first label. After this, what we have to do, so we will close the label, and then we have to take the input from the user inside the text field as well, right? So for that we have to go with the input tag, that means the input type. Okay, so here the input type will be in a form of a text, and the name will be a text field, right? So we will write just text field. Okay, and therein we will also take the ID. So ID here will be the text field. Okay, And then we need to have a placeholder. Now, what do you mean by a placeholder? So suppose we have a space like this, okay? And this particular area, this area wherein you will enter your text, this is called as a placeholder. So here we have to, we can write like for the user, enter text right over here. So this will be acting as a placeholder, right? So for that, what we have to do, so for that we have to move on to the next line, or rather first of all let me enter the placeholder over here. So our placeholder is enter text. That's a placeholder. Now this part is done for the text field. Now what we have to do, we have to just close off the div. Okay, so let's close the div. Now next, coming on to the checkboxes. Now first part is done, our text field is completed. Okay, now we move on to the checkboxes. For that, again we have to go on with the div and then the form part. Okay, so we'll just create a div, and then inside that we will take class and then form group. Okay, because we are trying to create here a form which will have the checkboxes, radio button, and the drop down. Okay, so here the form group, and then let me take a label wherein I'll just give a label as checkboxes for the user to understand that yes, this is for checkbox. Okay, then I'll close the label. So once this is done, now we have to work on the input file. Okay, so here I'll take the input type. So here the input type will be in a form of a checkbox, right? So I'll just write checkbox, and then the name here, the tag, it will also, suppose we want to create 2 or 3 checkboxes. So I'll just write checkbox 1, and then the ID I'll be also taking as checkbox 1. Okay, and then moving on further, I'll just mention the label for this. So for this, the label will be like option 1. Okay, so how it will come? So it will come something like this. There will be a checkbox, okay, a square checkbox, and here it will be written option 1. Okay, so I'll just representing as O1, that means option 1, and then on the right hand side a checkbox will appear. Okay, so here we have created the checkbox. Okay, we have taken the checkbox. Now we have to just write option 1, right? So for that, what we have to do, we have to take the label again, and inside the label we have to mention label for checkbox 1. Okay, and you can just close this and you can just write option 1. So you can change it according to your choice, like you have to give any other name, you can give over there. Okay, next, again, suppose this I have created for a checkbox 1, I'll again create it for another because I want 2. So I'll just write so let's say we'll change this. This is for checkbox 2. Okay, and then the label for this would be this one. So I'll just take this and I'll change it to option 2. Okay, and this is also checkbox 2. Okay, now these are created. Now what we have to do next, we have to close off the div. Okay, now what we are done with, we are done with the text field, we are done with the checkbox. Now what is left out? We are left out with 2 things. The first one is the radio button, other one is the drop down, right? So next we have to work with the radio button. So again, div class, and then the form group. Okay, just close this off, and then next what we have to do, we have to first, let's say, write the label. So label over here would be radio button. So these are all headings which will come up in your output, okay, which will help the user to understand that yes, you are showing a radio button, or you are showing a checkbox or a drop down. Okay, now this is done. Now we have to work on the input type. What kind of So inside input, now we have to understand the type, right? So what input type would be there for this one? So for this, as we are working on the radio button, so for this the input type would be radio or button. Okay, so let's write type, and then we can like mention inside here radio. Okay, so it's in the form of a radio. And then we'll also mention the ID. Suppose I take it as for radio 1. Okay, and the name field would be the radio group. So it's of a radio group, so I'll just write radio dash group. Okay, and what would be the value for it? So if I select this particular radio option, it will be selected for the option 1, right? So I'll just enter the value over here, that is option 1. Fine. Now this is done. Now what we have to do, we have to move on to the label part as we did for the checkboxes. So here again, the label. So for the label part, what we have to do, we have to write first of all label for. So what is this label for? This label is for the radio 1 button. So I'll just write radio 1. Okay. And then after that, I'll just close this off and I can write mention option 1. Fine. So this is how it comes up. Now again, like I want to have for the option 2 as well. So what we can do, we can just copy this input part and paste it over here and just change it off. Like we can change it to radio 2 and this one as option 2, and then the label part will be there for labeling the option 2. So here comes the label part. So next, change this off. So here radio 2 and then option 2. Okay, now these are done. Now next what you have to do, you have to go ahead and close the div. Now we are done with 3 things. First of all, one is the text field, next one is the checkboxes, and then the other one is the radio buttons. Now what is left out? So the left out with us is the drop down. So again, for the drop down we have to create the div, and inside that the class, which would be a group form. Okay, so herein we can write from group. Okay, and then after this we have to create the label tag, inside which we will have the drop down. Okay, so the label is for drop down. Okay, and then we can close this off and we can just write drop down and then close the label. Okay, now here, since we have a drop down, right? So for a drop down, how it is working, you from the drop down, suppose this is the place wherein the drop down is there like an arrow form. Okay, so we have to click on this particular arrow. So once this arrow is clicked, there will be options coming up like option 1, option 2, like this. Okay, so for that, what is actually happening, you have to select any one of these two. So for that we have to take the select tag as well. Okay, wherein you can select the ID, right? So you have to take the select tag, and inside the select I'll give it as ID as drop down. Okay, fine. So I'll be giving the ID as drop down, and next I'll also give it as a name for this. So let's say I'll close this and I'll give a name to it as drop down. Okay, and after this we have to just close off. Okay, so next what we have to do, since you have given the ID, you have given the name, now you have to also select the ID, the option for it, right? So herein you can write the option. Okay, so option, and you can write the value over here. So value, if I select the option number 1, right? So I can write over here option 1. Okay, and then close this off, and inside this you can just mention option 1. Fine, this is done for this. Now again you have to go for the let's say the option 2 if you want to do it. So for that, what do you have to do? I'll just take this one and I'll go here and I'll just change this off, let's say to option 2, this to option 2, and again over here, suppose I want another one, so I'll just create it as option 3 and this as option 3. Okay, now these parts are done. Now the drop down is also done. So next you have to close the select, which is already closed. You have to close the div. Okay, now next what you have to do, you have to close the form, and then you have to close the another div, the main div, then the body, and at last you have to close the HTML. Now this all is done. The whole code is done. Okay, and one more thing I want to remind you guys that we are doing this whole code without any CSS, without any styling. Okay, so next what we have to do, just save this off. Okay, and then let's check out the output, how it looks like. Okay, so if we go ahead and check out the output, now if you see this carefully, this is how the output looks like without the CSS. Okay, so here is the the heading, the HTML form input element, and then we wrote a p tag. So this is our p tag, okay, wherein it says explore different type of elements. This one is the text field wherein you can enter the text. Okay, then the checkboxes appeared. This one will be the checkboxes where you can select any of the checkboxes. This is your radio button. Okay, and the last one is your drop down. This one is your drop down. So this is how it looks like when you are not using any CSS in it. Okay, now let's see, like suppose we want to use the CSS, we want our output to like look attractive to the viewer. So for that, what you have to do, so you have to create a CSS. Okay, so we'll just take another file. Suppose I have created a form.css file. Okay, you can create it according to your choice. Now let's start with the CSS. So I'll take the body. I'll first of all defont the font family. Normal one which I take is Arial. Okay, and sans serif for the element or the property of the font family. Therein after that I'll just mention the constant value. So for me the margin is 0. Accordingly you can choose it according to your criteria, and I'll keep the padding also as 0 over here. Okay, now the body part is done. Now next what we have to do, we have to first of all start with the container, right? So let's say container, and then inside that I'm just choosing the maximum width. So I'll just start with, because I want it in a broader form, so I'll just keep it as 800x, and then the margin, so I'll keep the margin as automatic. So, and after that we have to take on the padding, like how should be the padding. So I'll just take it as 20px. After that I also want some background color to my whole form. Okay, wherein my buttons, the radio buttons and drop down, everything is there. So I'll take a background color, and I just want to keep it as gray. So for that, what you have to do, you have to write F4, the color format. Okay, then you have to also give a border. Again, it's up to you. If you want, you can. If you don't want, you can just leave it. So I'll just give the border radius. Okay, so let's say we keep it as 5x. Okay, and next the last one which I want to give to the container is the box shadow. Okay, so I'll take it as box shadow, and inside this, that's the standard one. So 4px and then the RGBA value. Okay, now this is done. The container part is done. Now next we have to move on to the form which we have created, in which our text field, our radio button and the drop down are there. So first of all, I'll make sure that my form alignment is toward the left hand side, because I want everything towards the left, right? Left hand side, and then a margin to it. So let's say I give a top margin to it, which is as 20px. Okay, this part is done. Now again the CSS I'll be doing for the form group. Okay, form group as in wherein you are placing your text field, your radio button and your drop down. So here nothing we have to do, we have to just choose the margin. If you wish you can, if you don't, you don't have to do it. Okay, so 2px. Okay, this is done. Now next, the label which is there. We worked on label, right? So for that, what we have to do, we have to display it. So display, I want it in the form of a block. So I'll just insert as a block. Okay, now label is done. Now comes up the input field, okay, wherein we have to take the input like in the form of a text or a checkbox or a radio button, right? So for that, we will just write input. Okay, and then we will write the type. So our first type is text. Okay, then it should be separated by a comma. Then we'll take again the input. So the next one was for checkbox, right? So here we'll write type and then checkbox. Okay, now this is done. Now again, next was for radio button. So we'll write input and then the type. And here we'll just mention as radio. And then after that, we have to also, like if it's for a radio button, we have to do it for the drop down as well. So we will write select, like we have to select it from the drop down, and text area. Okay, that's it. Now we'll just enter inside it, and we have to just check off the width first. I'll keep the width as to complete, that is 100%. And let's say the padding, I'll keep it as 10px. Okay, and after the padding, I'll just keep the margin also. So let's say the margin is, and after this, we'll keep the border. So I'll keep the border as 1px, and it should be in a solid. Okay, wherein I'll use this color, like it should be a black color, and according to your choice, you can put all these things inside the CSS, like how you want the alignment, how you want the the margin, what kind of color you want in the whole form, what should be the radius of the border, what should be the length, the width, and everything. So that's what you do inside the CSS styling, right? So I'll just take the radius, the last one, that is 3px. Okay, now this is done. Now what we have to do next, we just have to save this off first. Okay, so I'll click on save. Now this is saved. Now what we have to do, we have to change it over here as well. Now if you see in this particular line wherein we use the CSS, that is HERF, for linking the CSS file, so here it is written style.css, right? So we have to change it from our file name. So our file name is form, right? Form.css. So we'll change it to form.css, and we will save this particular. Okay, so now both are saved. Now what we have to do, we have to check out the output. Okay, so let's see how the output looks like. So if I just refresh it, now if you see, this is how it's coming up. Okay, now what we have to do, we have to change it right over here. Okay, so next what we have to do, in order to make it into one single form, for that what we have to do, we have to change over here. So you have to change this right over here. You have to check this off, like the whole curve, if it's perfect or not. So here in the CSS, everything looks good, like Yeah. So now we have to go off and check off this. Okay, the form CSS. So here you have to make sure like there's no space over here. Your name, the CSS name, the file name is written correctly. So just save this off again. Okay. Now one more thing before seeing of the output, one more thing is there, like you can do the CSS styling right inside this particular HTML code itself. Okay. Or you can separate this off completely as I did right now. So what if you separate this off completely, what it will do, it will actually make your code shorter. Okay, and it will help you off to separate the HTML content and the CSS content, and then to analyze like wherein if it's there is any error or anything, you can easily find out. Okay, now everything is saved off. Now let me go ahead and open the file. So this is my file, the new file. I'll open this off. Now if you see carefully, this is how the output looks like. Okay, this is the text field. If you see, this particular part is the text field. Okay, here the label is there, checkboxes. Underneath this, these two are the checkboxes. Okay, then again a label is created, radio button. These two are the radio button, and then a label is there, drop down, and this one is for the drop down. Okay, now if you see, let's check out if the drop down is working. So if I click on this particular arrow, so here the option 1, option 2, and option 3 comes up, right? And if you go on to the radio button, so you can see the radio button is also clickable. You can click it, and then the check boxes are also clickable. You can click it off. Okay. Next, in the text field, you can write whatever you want, and then you can create the text boxes, and then you can maybe submit the, you can put a submit button at the bottom right over here. Right over here, a submit button can be created, and then you can click on it, and then the form can be submitted with all the options. So this is how you can create an HTML form with relevant input elements like the checkboxes, the radio buttons, and the drop down like these. Okay, so hope this video was useful to everyone. If it is, please go ahead and subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell icon so that you get the latest updates on the coding. And don't forget to like this video, share it as much as you can with your friends, with your colleagues, so that they are also aware about the various input elements which are available in the HTML, with the help of which you can create numerous and various forms, and obviously you can create a responsive form for your viewers, for your projects, for your website, right? So that's it for today, guys. We'll meet you guys on our next video. Don't forget to subscribe. Thank you so much for watching.